Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Future is Socialist number 3. Today, we're going to be discussing the Republican War on America. And first of all, let me just say I'm your host, Emberly McCullough, and welcome to the Future is Socialist. Okay, so today we're going to talk about the Republican War on America. We're also going to discuss what's going on with Breonna Taylor, and we're going to talk about Cuba's working on a people's vaccine. And then we're also going to do a working class history segment as well today. Okay, great. So let's jump right in with our first segment, the Republican War on America. Okay, here we go. This is from Counterpunch from March 10th, 2021. The Republican War on America by Evangelos Valianatos. The Biden administration is becoming an Obama administration. The Republican senators and Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives are fighting Biden exactly like they fought Obama, opposing his initiatives and planning to turn their Supreme Court and hundreds of federal judges they put in office during the Trump era against him. The Republican politicians' hatred for their Democratic colleagues is a product of a decades-long TV and radio indoctrination funded by billionaires who like slavery-like conditions for the working class. These bureaucrats thrive on the politics of division and corruption. Why would they take climate change seriously, for example, when the burning of fossil fuels continues to make them kings of the realm? The second source of political partisanship and corruption has theological origins. The country has so many churches of opposing denominations that they create a pandemonium of theological conflict which spills into politics. Each faithful is voting for the candidate supporting his or her prejudices. Millions are against abortion. Other millions are for guns, pesticides, etc. But the greatest harm of these one God business religions comes from denying living in harmony with the natural world, the source of all life. Religious preaching comes out of books written by desert people about 2 millennia ago. It has little, if any, relevant lessons for people educated in the humanities and the sciences of the modern world. Religious messages concern only the faithful following a particular dogma. The other people are labeled infidels. This confuses Americans even more than the vague and misleading business messages of the plutocrats in power and behind power. What do the plutocrats want? The political minions of private and corporate wealth keep saying they prefer small government, save for the gigantic Pentagon and numerous security agencies possessing endless billions for private and corporate contracts. No matter the president and the members of Congress, the Pentagon has a direct access to the spigot of the U.S. Treasury. Obama signed on countless billions for the modernization of nuclear weapons. Now the country is building a weapon of mass destruction, a $100 billion missile for carrying nuclear weapons as far away as 6,000 miles. And capable of killing hundreds of thousands of people. Plutocrats love this spending for weapons. They also worship gigantic things. They lobby politicians for funding farmers armed with large machines and toxic chemicals. It's irrelevant to them that these big farms are really factories responsible for more than a third of the total U.S. greenhouse gas emissions. Like Trump, plutocrats pretend there's no global warming. They are building a fortress America, so they advocate the rights of people to be armed. Their business mantra is the larger the corporation, the better. This corporate agenda has been guiding both Republicans and Democrats for decades, but sometimes, as in the years starting with the Obama administration in 2009, the white congressional Democrats have been embracing non-white minorities, rapidly becoming a majority. The aspiration of non-white Americans is for some kind of a better deal from the government. This close alliance between white Democratic politicians and non-white Americans is alarming the overwhelmingly white Republicans who see they are becoming a minority. The election of Obama and Biden confirms this great political storm in America, the Trump Messiah. Trump was an unknown plutocrat. I don't think he was unknown, but okay. Trump was an unknown plutocrat who harvested this palpable anger among white Americans. In desperation, especially after the second election of Obama, whites grasped the lies of Trump, hoping this Messiah would deliver. He did not, because Trump worked only for his private ego and interests. Yet about 70 million of disillusioned and confused Republicans voted for Trump, who in desperation and madness instigated the January 6, 2021 Capitol insurrection. Is America governable? This is all to say the country is so divided that governing it becomes a matter of haggling, continuous compromises, and despair. The Senate passage of the coronavirus stimulus bill, March 6, 2021, illustrates the coming struggle for the soul and for the governing of America. The 1.9 trillion bill passed over unanimous Republican opposition. Unanimous Republican opposition. Now, why would the Republicans oppose this largely anti-poverty plan? Kentucky, home of Mitch McConnell, state Senate minority leader, is overwhelmingly poor. Doesn't McConnell and the other Republican senators want to alleviate some of the dark ages poverty in Kentucky and Republican red states? Biden does not have much ground to maneuver. He promised to unite the polarized country and to make it a better place to live. And unlike his predecessors, he promised to tackle the greatest threat to America and the world, climate change. While the present intransigent Republican plutocrats in the Senate, with the present intransigent Republican plutocrats in the Senate, he will be able to fulfill none of his great promises for America. To break this impasse, two things are necessary. Raise the understanding and consciousness of the American people on what is at stake with climate change, as this climate change is the paramount danger that may smash the country and the world. And since the Republicans have an abiding respect for the Pentagon, send Pentagon generals all over the country, not merely to talk about the danger of climate change to national security, but to lead projects of constructing, with Pentagon money, the solar and wind energy infrastructure of the country. This also means that the Pentagon itself moves rapidly to abandon fossil fuels. The other priority for Biden is to see that several Republican senators don't get reelected. How? Send Democrat billionaires in selected red states to fund public and private enterprises to put Republicans to work in well-paying jobs for the revitalization of rural America. American agriculture has to return to producing organic food in order to stop destroying the natural world. This is a gigantic task that billionaires with a love for their children in America must fund. Biden must also recruit business executives to embrace climate change. Those executives can probably tone down the confused anti-nature rhetoric of the clerics of the one-God religions. With these allies, Pentagon, Democratic billionaires, and business people, Biden can persuade the partisan Republicans to join him or face the end of their political career. After all, dealing seriously with climate change is not a partisan issue, but a life and death concern and fear affecting national security at its most intimate and threatening. We are speaking of a rising ecological and social catastrophe. Evangelos Valianatos is a historian and an environmental strategist who worked at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for 25 years. He is the author of 6 books, including Poison Spring with McKay Jenkins. I think this plan that he has, this 2-part plan, is not a wholly bad plan to have. We need to raise the consciousness of the American people. Honestly, like, this is the one thing we really, really honestly need to do is to, I love the fact, yes, get the Pentagon involved and get them to send generals out all over the country talking about climate change, because climate change is the biggest problem that we are going to have in the near future. And it's going to affect every one of us, whether you're rich, whether you're poor, whether you're in the middle, whether you're on the outs, whether you're homeless, whether you have a home to live in. It doesn't matter whether you have a job or you don't have a job. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're white, whether you're black, whether you're any color. It doesn't matter. The world is, island nations are being destroyed. Island nations are being destroyed right now. Coastlines are being destroyed. Okay. And the Republicans don't seem to care. That's the problem. It's not that they don't seem to care. It's that they actually don't care. I mean, think about that for a moment. Mitch McConnell calls himself the Grim Reaper. How can you trust a man who calls himself death? Let's be realistic, people. How can we trust this man? How can Kentuckians, this is a message straight to you, all of my lovely people in Kentucky. Vote out Mitch McConnell. Vote out the Republicans. If you want a better future for you and your children and your family and your friends and your communities, vote out Republicans. Actually, that message can go to every Republican in every red state, in every rural area, vote out these fucking scumbags. That's what they really are. They're scumbags. They don't care about you. They make your life harder. They make your life worse. And yet, keeps on being reelected, keeps on. And people in Kentucky and the other red states, especially rural states, Alabama, Mississippi, Arkansas, Kansas, all these states, they're so poor. You know why they're poor? Because they're Republican states. They're red states. Red states. Yep. And you need to vote these people out. All right. So that was an interesting article. Let's see. Is there anything else in here we want to talk about? I love the idea of sending Democrat billionaires and selected red states to fund public and private enterprises to put Republicans to work in well-paying jobs for the revitalization of rural America. I don't know if any of you have really been keeping up with what's happening in Appalachia with the coal mines, the coal miners, but they have basically been destroyed. The mining companies went away and their livelihoods went away and towns dried up, and it's just not good, guys. It's really not good. Okay, now we're going to move on to Breonna Taylor. This comes from the WSWS.org website, the World Socialist website. Protests continue 1 year after Louisville, Kentucky police brutally murdered Breonna Taylor. This is by Kevin Reed. Protests and demonstrations took place across the U.S. on Saturday to mark 1 year since 3 Louisville police officers brutally murdered Breonna Taylor in her apartment in the middle of the night. Hundreds of people rallied and marched into downtown Louisville, and demonstrations and vigils took place in Atlanta, New York City, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle, Detroit, and Grand Rapids to demand justice for Taylor and her family. The Associated Press reported hundreds defied a curfew set by the military in Yangon, Myanmar, to gather for a candlelit rally to mark the anniversary of Taylor's death. Oh, in Myanmar. Protesters began gathering in Louisville at Jefferson Square Park near the Jefferson County District Court and the Kentucky Court of Justice at noon, and placed photos, signs, flowers, and candles in a circle in the middle of the park. The crowd was addressed by Taylor's mother, Tamika Palmer, before it marched down Broadway chanting Breonna's name. Reminders of the reasons for the ongoing protests against police violence were revealed throughout the day in Louisville. At first, Louisville Metropolitan Police Department restricted access to the protest area and contained the demonstrators with police squad cars. Later, as the demonstration continued into the evening and headed across Big Four Bridge, LMPD declared the group an unlawful assembly, and an announcement was made by officers in the crowd that the crowd had to disperse or police may dispense chemical agents and arrest those who refused. There were also crackdowns on protesters by the police in Los Angeles, Seattle, and Portland on Saturday night, with numerous demonstrators arrested. According to one Twitter post, 2 protesters were run over by Los Angeles police cruisers in the Hollywood neighborhood, where police officers in riot gear confronted demonstrators near the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Jesus Christ, the police have gone crazy. The 26-year-old African-American EMT and aspiring nurse was shot and killed on March 13th, 2020. After plainclothes officers Jonathan Mattingly, Brett Hankinson, and Miles Cosgrove, all scumbags, executed a warrant on her apartment just after midnight by battering down the door, thinking they were the victims of a break-in. Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, fired a warning shot from his legally possessed handgun, and struck Mattingly in the leg. No-knock warrants are evil. Evil. They are bad. They are wrong. They result in death. Almost every single one results in death or injury. No-knock warrants are bad. They need to go. No more no-knock warrants. The 26-year-old African-American, I'm sorry, I already read that part. The officers then indiscriminately returned 32 shots into the apartment. 6 of them that were fired by Cosgrove fatally struck the young woman. Several of the 10 shots fired by Hankinson entered an adjacent apartment where a 5-year-old child, a pregnant woman, and her husband were sleeping. A cover up of Taylor's murder was immediately organized by the LMPD, beginning at the scene of the crime. The facts of the shooting were falsified in the police incident report. Okay, sorry, guys. Let me take a moment. My son is calling me. Hey, boo. I'm okay. I'm right in the middle of a video. What's up? You couldn't get the black one? Oh, shit. Okay. Okay. Did you have some other kind of gummies? Oh, okay, cool. How's Patrick? Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm in the middle of a video. That's okay. All right. Love you. Bye. All right. Sorry about that, guys. My son didn't realize I was live streaming right now. All right. Let's get back to the story. A cover up of Taylor's murder was immediately organized by the LMPD, beginning at the scene of the crime. The facts of the shooting were falsified in the police incident report. No search of the apartment was ever conducted, and Walker was arrested and charged with attempted murder. Without the eruption of a mass movement internationally against police violence that followed the murder of George Floyd by the Minneapolis Police Department on Memorial Day 2020, it is likely that Taylor's murder would have been swept under the rug by LMPD and the justice system in the state of Kentucky. A month after the protests that ensued from MPD officer Derek Chauvin choking Floyd to death, which was captured on smartphone video stream by an eyewitness and watched by more than 1 billion people, what happened to Taylor became widely known, and Kentucky state authorities were forced to intervene in response. 3.5 months later, on June 23rd, Hankinson was fired by the LMPD for blindly firing through the covered patio door and window of Taylor's apartment. However, the cover-up of the murder of Taylor continued on September 23rd when Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron announced that a grand jury decided not to bring any charges against either Cosgrove or Mattingly, who were justified in their use of force, while charging Hankinson with wanton endangerment of Taylor's neighbors. So no justice for Breonna. No justice at all for Breonna. Shortly after Cameron's announcement, Cosgrove launched a campaign to raise money for his retirement. The day before being cleared, Mattingly sent an email to more than 1,000 fellow LMPD officers defending the shooting and subsequently sued Walker for battery, assault, and intentional emotional distress. Significantly, fully aware of the socially and politically explosive nature of the case against the LMPD, the city of Louisville settled a wrongful death lawsuit by Taylor's family for $12 million 2 days before Cameron's revelation of the grand jury decision. Law enforcement and legal authorities made several similar announcements in advance of the 1-year anniversary of Taylor's shootings. On March 8th, Jefferson Circuit Court Judge Alou Stevens ruled that the charges against Walker have been permanently dismissed. This means that Walker cannot be criminally recharged for shooting Mattingly. Excellent news. Walker is also pursuing immunity from prosecution and damages in the civil lawsuit against the city, which, if successful, would mean that Mattingly's suit would be thrown out. And it should be successful because Mattingly should not be able to sue the man he attacked. Additionally, the FBI released a statement on Saturday morning saying it remains steadfast in its commitment to bringing this investigation to its appropriate conclusion. Blaming its inability to complete a federal investigation before the year was up on COVID-19, the FBI's Louisville special agent Robert Brown claimed it had made significant progress since May and that the team is actively investigating all aspects of her death and working diligently until the investigation is completed. Yeah, I'm not sure I believe that. Honestly, not sure. President Joe Biden submitted his especially meaningless comments via Twitter on Saturday afternoon, posting that Taylor's death was a tragedy and that we must press ahead with meaningful police reform in Congress that he is committed to signing into law. The Democrats and various pseudo-left political organizations continue to attempt to present police violence, like the horrifying murder of Breonna Taylor in her own apartment, as entirely a racial matter, when in fact more than 1,000 working class and poor people of all ethnicities are killed each year by police across the U.S. The struggle against police violence, along with the apparatus of repression that was applied throughout the spring and summer on protesters in the form of rubber bullets, pepper spray, tear gas, baton strikes, and beanbag rifles, and in defense of democratic rights, requires a political movement of the entire working class based on a socialist program. Here's another story from last October. Breonna Taylor grand jury was never given option to indict killer cops. An anonymous grand juror in the Breonna Taylor case released a letter through their attorney on Tuesday. This story was written, yes, back in October. I'm sorry. Accusing Republican Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron of not allowing the jury to consider whether homicide charges could and should be brought against any of the police responsible for her death. The killing of Taylor, along with the police murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota on May 25th, was the catalyst for thousands of multiracial and multi-ethnic protests against police violence in the U.S. and internationally. In cities such as Portland, Oregon, and Louisville, demonstrations were held for over 120 consecutive days, despite relentless police terror and intimidation, the imposition of unconstitutional curfews, and the disappearing of peaceful protesters. Wow, I'm having a hard time talking today. In Louisville and hundreds of other cities with Democratic leadership, police have allowed fascist sympathizers and white supremacist gangs such as Oath Keepers and Three Percenters to violate curfew and patrol the protests with police in their attempts to silence peaceful demonstrators. The letter was allowed to be disseminated to the public after Jefferson County Circuit Court Judge Annie O'Connell ruled on Tuesday morning that all 12 jurors in the case would be allowed to speak publicly on the proceedings if they choose. This is a rare exception in the normally secretive grand jury process, usually imposed in order to protect the police and shield evidence from the public. In explaining her decision to allow the jurors to speak if they chose, O'Connell wrote that justice requires disclosure of the grand jury proceedings in this case. Cameron's office had requested a stay of any court order, arguing that by allowing anyone to speak out may compromise the right to a fair trial of fired Officer Brett Hankinson, the only cop charged with a crime. O'Connell objected, writing that Cameron's argument had no basis in reality. In the letter released through attorney Kevin Glogauer and attributed to anonymous grand juror number 1, the juror wrote that after hearing the Attorney General Daniel Cameron's press conference and with my duty as a grand jury juror being over, my duty as a citizen compelled action. The grand jury was not presented any charges other than the 3 wanton endangerment charges against Detective Hankinson. It continues. The grand jury did not have homicide offenses explained to them. The grand jury never heard anything about those laws. Self-defense or justification was never explained either. Questions were asked about additional charges, and the grand jury was told that there would be none because the prosecutors didn't feel they could make them stick. The letter was released nearly a month after Cameron, in a widely viewed September 23rd press conference, claimed that state prosecutors had walked the grand jury through every homicide offense. Yeah, so he's a liar. After Cameron, who is African American, announced his decision, which only included the 3 courts of wanton endangerment against Hankinson for shooting into the neighboring apartments, Trump praised Cameron for doing a fantastic job. I think he's a star. Of course he did. The letter continues that the grand jury didn't agree that certain actions were justified, nor did it decide the indictment should be the only charges in the Breonna Taylor case. The grand jury was not given the opportunity to deliberate on those charges and deliberated only on what was presented to them. I cannot speak for others, but I can help the truth be told. A second anonymous grand juror also wrote that they were pleased with this result and will be discussing possible next steps with counsel. Cameron, lying through his teeth during the September 23rd press conference, said that the grand jury agreed that former Louisville police officer Brett Hankinson and current officers John Mattingly and Miles Cosgrove were justified in their actions, which resulted in the death of Taylor. The police, serving a no-knock warrant, broke into Taylor's apartment after midnight on March 13th and fired 32 rounds into her apartment. Taylor was shot 6 times, while Mattingly was also struck by a bullet, which, according to an FBI ballistics report, was fired by Taylor's boyfriend, Kenneth Walker. However, Walker's attorney, Steve Romanes, has cited a Kentucky State Police ballistics report released after Cameron's press conference that does not conclude that Mattingly was necessarily struck by the single round Walker fired and could have been a case of friendly fire. Sam Aguiar, one of the attorneys for the Taylor family, wrote in a statement following the release of the letter that Cameron tried to hide behind secrecy rules and now his lies got exposed. Aguiar and Benjamin Crump, another attorney for the family, reiterated their calls for the appointment of a new independent prosecutor. Cameron has acknowledged that prosecutors under him did not offer the grand jury the option of charging any of the officers with homicide. In a statement released Tuesday night, Cameron justified his decision, saying that he would not bring charges against the officers if they could not be proven under Kentucky law, and that indictments obtained in the absence of sufficient proof under the law do not stand up and are not fundamentally fair to anyone. As is the case in every single country, the question of fairness under the law is a class question. The bourgeois courts and police are instruments of class rule created not to enforce fairness, but to uphold class exploitation. Justice will continue to elude the thousands of victims of police violence as long as the system they are sworn to protect remains. The fact is, police, as special armed bodies, are granted enormous power by the capitalist state to kill whenever they feel threatened, including when breaking into someone's home, regardless of whether they have actually committed a crime. What the George Floyd case and the Breonna Taylor case has exposed, and why people are so upset about what's happening and what has happened to so many people killed by the police. It's exposed this. The police are out of control. They're literally out of control. Last year, I went to the county courthouse in the state that I live in, California, where I live, in the county that I live in. I went to support 3 families who had had their young sons murdered by police in Vallejo, California. We went to demand justice from the DA of our county. We didn't get justice. We won't see justice for those 3 boys killed by Vallejo police officers. We won't see justice for Breonna Taylor. We might see justice for George Floyd. His family did just get a $27 million, I believe it was $27 million settlement from the city of Minneapolis. And Derek Chauvin, the murderer who put his knee on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, is currently on trial. They just finished voir dire, I believe, which is the picking of jurors. So we will see. It's going to be exciting. I'll keep you updated on what happens with Chauvin's trial, and let's hope that this murdering police officer gets convicted of murder, because that's exactly what he did. You cannot accidentally, there is no way that you can accidentally put your knee on someone's neck. It just doesn't happen. It's not possible. This was done with intent and malice. And when you do something with intent to kill and with malice, that's murder. So I don't understand why police and people who love the police want to protect these killers, because they're murderers, they're killers. But, until we stand up, until we get up off of our butts and demand better, as long as the people of Kentucky keep letting Republicans run their state, nothing's going to change. We have to make the Republicans obsolete. Conservatism is bad. Socialism is life affirming. Life affirming. Okay? I want you to live in dignity. I want you to live with dignity. I want you to be well fed with good, healthy food. I want you to have a nice place to live that's free of pests, that's free of, mold, leaking, a nice place to live. I want you to have a job where you are a part of an actual team, where you have a say in what happens at your job. Yes, that's what I want for you. That's, as a socialist, what I want for you. I want you to have dignity in life. I want you to have vacations. I want you to have health care, free health care. I want you to have free education across the board. If you want to get a PhD under socialist society, you could go and get your PhD for free. All right. Now we're going to move on to our next segment, number 4. And this is from Counterpunch from today. Cuba working on a people's vaccine, and the US and the world should get behind it, by Beth Geglia. The life of just one person is worth more than the private property of the richest man. This is what's written on the Calixto Garcia Public Hospital in Havana, Cuba, as a testament to the country's commitment to free public health care and to putting people before profit. I know this about Cuba because in March, at the onset of the global COVID-19 pandemic, I spent a week in the ICU at Calixto Garcia. I had been hit by a speeding ambulance, and Cuban doctors saved my life, operated on me twice, and nursed me to stability before putting me on a private medical evacuation flight back to the US. Private medical evacuation flight back to the US. All of this, including the flight, was free of cost to me, covered by Cuba's government run insurance for foreign visitors. Covered by Cuba's government run insurance for foreign visitors. That's amazing. That's beautiful. That's amazing. Taiwan also has this. From my hospital bed, as the global emergency around me escalated, I witnessed how the Cuban government swiftly mobilized resources to protect its citizens from COVID-19. At-home testing for anyone with symptoms, door-to-door preventative education in the most vulnerable neighborhoods, and coordinated isolation when necessary. While deaths soared around 100,000 in the US, Cuba was able to get the average daily COVID-19 related deaths close to zero for most of May through August. Cuba's humanist approach when it comes to health was not new to me. In 2013, I directed a documentary on a free hospital in northern Honduras. The doctors there, all from Afro-Indigenous Garifuna communities, had been trained in Cuba at the Latin American School of Medicine, ELAM, for free. Cuba created the ELAM in 1999 to train doctors from the poorest regions of countries around the world, including the US, providing full scholarships of 6 years tuition, room and board, with the hope that these doctors would return and provide accessible and preventative healthcare in their communities. The ELAM was born as a response to the devastation of Hurricane Mitch in 1998 and has trained tens of thousands of doctors from over 110 countries since then. That is absolutely amazing. Cuba is now poised to play an important role in global efforts to curb the pandemic. New variants in South Africa and Brazil, all with yet unknown implications for vaccine effectiveness, have shown us that any effort to achieve herd immunity is only as good as it is accessible equitably across the globe. Much easier to write than read. Yet, as predicted, the global north is outpacing the global south dramatically in vaccination. On February 3rd, Anthony Fauci said in an event hosted by the Journal of the American Medical Association, the JAMA Network, that developing COVID-19 vaccines is not a race. We want everybody to get over the finish line, he assured. Dr. Fauci mentioned the Russian and the Chinese vaccines and later suggested that the U.S. should help countries strengthen their vaccine manufacturing capacity to promote more vaccinations globally. At no point did he mention Cuba. Thanks to an established publicly funded biotechnology program, Cuba currently has 4 vaccine candidates. One of those vaccines, Soberana 02, started phase 3 clinical trials in early March. Another candidate, Abdallah, started phase 2 trials in February. Both vaccines are being developed by public research institutions and are the most promising candidates in Latin America. The fact that Dr. Fauci failed to mention these candidates is disappointing. The U.S. and other governments should set aside antiquated hostility toward Cuba and support the development and distribution of its vaccines. This is true. I don't understand why the U.S. and other governments have this all-out hostility towards the Cubans. I've never understood it. Perhaps I need to speak with someone and interview someone who knows a lot more about the Cuban-American relations than I do. I will look into that for the future. In fact, I'm going to write that in my book so that I can Cuba government interview. Okay. The first step is to take the vaccine candidates seriously and remove any barriers presented by U.S. sanctions. And let me tell you something, if you haven't figured out by now that economic sanctions are war, then you are behind the curve. Economic sanctions are a form of warfare. They hurt the people. People like you and me living our lives, going to work, taking care of our children, walking our pets, eating, drinking, socializing, doing all the things that we do. Sanctions hurt people. They hurt people, not the country itself, just the people. Second, global actors should support Cuba's efforts to scale up manufacturing should they decide to pursue this. Unlike current vaccines, which are hoarded by the global north, Cuba's vaccine candidates have the potential to become the people's vaccine that activists and scientists around the world have called for. For example, the World Health Organization's COVID 19 Technology Access Pool, CTAP, makes it possible to have the first vaccine ever licensed openly on the global stage, while the WHO's better known COVAX program aims to pool procurement and distribute vaccine doses more equally. It does nothing to address the underlying intellectual property regime that produces monopolies on vaccines and limits their manufacturing. The CTAP was created at the onset of the pandemic to pool the rights to life saving technologies and facilitate a truly equitable and effective vaccine rollout, but no country or company has chosen to license through the CTAP to date. Regardless of the mechanism, Cuban officials have stated a clear intention to, once again, place people before profit. Cuba's strategy to market the vaccine is a combination of things. First comes humanity and the impact on health. And in second place is our industry's need to sustain sufficient production of the vaccine and medicines for the country, explained Vicente Verez of the Finlay Vaccines Institute in Cuba for Prensa Latina TV. We are not a multinational where returns on investment are the number one reason for existing, and improving health is just a consequence. We work the opposite way. For us, it's about achieving health. The returns are a consequence of achieving health, but they will never be the priority. Having an adequately tested and accessible vaccine from Cuba will, as the Soberana O2 name suggests, contribute to the autonomy of countries like Cuba and nearby Haiti to safeguard their populations free from dependence on multinational monopolies. But it also might be the same global vaccine rollout that leaves us all susceptible to new strains. The U.S. support Cuban vaccine development because it is good for us and it is good for the world. Beth Geglia is a researcher and documentary filmmaker. She is completing her PhD in anthropology at American University. Her doctoral research focuses on ZEDE development, governance, and land struggles in Honduras. All right, we're almost at the end of the show today. We're going to now do our last segment on working class history for today. Today's working class history. March 15th, 1908. The Rochester Democrat and Chronicle newspaper in New York State denounced anarchist women with this headline: "Women anarchists have become the terror of world's police." The article went on to state, "The guardians of the world nearly always find a woman implicated when a ruler is stricken down. Emotional women lose sense of fear." Wow. Women anarchists have become the terror of world's police. We women, we are a force, aren't we? Yes, we are. March 15th, 1917. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated as the February Revolution swept Russia. Nicholas, already unpopular for his oppressive and brutal reign, became widely hated when Russia became embroiled in World War I. The war caused the deaths of over 3 million people in the Russian Empire, and labor shortages in the countryside drastically affected the country's food supply, causing widespread hunger and starvation. The reason that I bring this book to you every stream is because we are woefully, Americans especially, are woefully and depressingly ignorant of working class history. Why I'm bringing it to you. And I'm going to be bringing you other historical videos coming soon. Sometime in April, I will be releasing a video called Marxism and Alienation. We're going to start talking about some of these things. I'm also going to do a series of four videos on socialist women. So that'll be coming in the next week or so. So there's a lot of good videos and live stream topics coming. So if you want to see anything in particular that I haven't covered, or you are interested in a topic that you want me to dive deeper into, just let me know. Put a comment in the comment section, the live chat, whatever. And also please subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when I'm coming out. And I'm also going to get on a better schedule so that you guys will know when I'm going to be going online. This just starting out has been everything is a little up in arms with my son maybe going back to work. And my doctor's appointments because I have a terminal illness. Um, and so, like this week, I'm not sure how I'm going to do the videos because tomorrow, I have to go get my eyes taken care of. Then Wednesday, I have the first of my COVID vaccine. Thursday, I have a PET scan, and Friday, I continue with my PTSD therapy. So, lots of doctor's appointments this week, lots of stuff going on. Um, but I will keep up and I will put out a schedule that's going to work for all of us. Okay? Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in and listening to me today talk about some current events and with some commentary, and I will see you again tomorrow. Have a blessed day. Goodbye.